The history of the Keene goings on. When Dad died, we collected all the 16 millimeter movie film that he had stored in boxes, and I proceeded to show them on a screen and start recording portions of them on a video camera. And this is the movie that follows. It was great fun. It took quite a bit of time to sort of reassemble it. And in some places, I don't think I have fully um, matched the sequence of time, but it is the story that started out in 19, essentially 33, mostly recorded by Dad on his 16 millimeter movie camera. During the time, it started during the time he was working with Eastman Kodak. So I hope you'll enjoy what you see and the stories that are told in connection with the movie pictures as you view it. Of course, having a firstborn child certainly gives any parent excitement, and a lot of attention is played upon the new person in the family. Here I kind of look like my sister, but it is not my sister, it is I, Robert Crombie Keene, born the 2nd of December, 1201 in the morning. And we lived in Rochester a few years. No, actually, it wasn't a few years, it was less than that. We finally moved to Flushing, New York after Dad started a business with a partner, Lee Irwin, in the photographic business in New York City. Of course, I had the latest model of the single passenger vehicle, um, all made out of metal. Plastics were not universally in use in the forms that we have now today by any means. Some of the activity around the piece of equipment is familiar to me now as I watch Micah as he plays with things mechanical and is interested in anything that has wheels and moves and does things. So that's kind of fun. Mother was very stylish with her hats. And I had a cousin, Marilyn Follett, who lived up in New London, Connecticut, and the movie camera was used quite a bit in the gatherings we had with her. He was a draftsman with a boat company up there in New London, as well as a teacher of skating. And she is doing her best to give me a ride in her wagon. The wagon doesn't look like it's a very large one for someone who really doesn't want to be there in the first place. It looks like I had a mind of my own. Aunt Marion, along with my mother and me, never was quite clear in my mind the relationship that my mother had with my Aunt Marion. New York City back in 1934. Oh, mommy, stop kissing me all the time. I'm a little older here, obviously, and learning that ice is slippery. I can remember being a thumb sucker. For some reason, I believe this was in Stewart Manor, the first house we had on Long Island. Susan was born in Nassau Hospital, 1936, February the 24th, I believe. She got suitable attention from her older brother with lots of kisses and breastfeeding was old-fashioned, I think, in this period of time, and not something that women were encouraged to do, unfortunately. I have no recollection of mother breastfeeding Peter, who came in 9 years after I was born, but father discreetly did not record any such activity if she did indeed breastfeed Susan, or me for that matter. Clearly, Susan's older now. This must be approaching at least 1935, 36 probably. This is the Sunday that Susan and I were baptized at the Presbyterian Church in Stewart Manor, and it's the day that I am told I sang hi ho, it's off to work I go as I walk down the aisle. I'm very proud of my Sunday school papers that I shared with Mom and Dad. This is the fireplace in the Stewart Manor house, and it's there that I came into the house crying because the girl that I was playing with in the sandbox had thrown sand in my face, and my mother told me to stick up for my own rights, and so the next week I proceeded to hit her on the head with a shovel, and clearly that was not the way to solve the problem, and mother was worried that the mother who came to the house very irate, I can vaguely recall the scene where she was yelling and screaming at my mother that she was going to sue her for my assaulting her daughter. the excitement and the fun of being outdoors in the wintertime was an activity that we took part of, as did Mom and Dad, either skating or skiing. It's always hard to picture your parents when they were younger and more vital than when you remember them. New Hyde Park Station on the Long Island Railroad. I don't know who is playing peekaboo with Susan here. Goose Rocks Beach up in Maine, probably 1938. Is a large German family lived a couple of doors towards the beach from Grandpa Bampton's cottage. And they were a fun-loving group of people, as you can see. And unfortunately, were not very well treated during the war because of their German heritage. Goose Rocks Beach was long, shallow water, and so the sun could heat up the water more readily, and so it was a very swimmable area. Great clams. I used to go down in the morning and dig clams, and my mother would make clam chowder from the clams, and I thought that was pretty special. I also did some riding with the milk wagon, horse and wagon. This is the outside of Grandpa and Grandma's cottage there at Goose Rocks Beach. They had a home in Kennebunkport, and that's a matter of 15 minutes or 20 minutes away south of Goose Rocks. Grandpa Bampton used to feed me the pulp of the orange juice that he squeezed each morning for everybody. And we would get up before everybody else and he would squeeze the orange juice. This is Grandpa and Grandma Keene, Lena and Robert Franklin Keene. And they certainly spent time with us when we were very small. But unfortunately, Grandma Keene died after a long illness, Alzheimer's disease, more than likely, and we never saw her or attended any funeral service that was related to her death. Hathaway Drive is where we moved. Mom and Dad bought a house, and I think they paid $18,000 for it. And it was 1939, maybe 1940, and they eventually bought the house lot behind their house, so this provided a great backyard for gardens. Jones Beach on Long Island was where we could spend hot summer days on occasion, and the surf was much different than Goose Rocks Beach by a long shot. Of course, during the war, we had rationing, gas rationing, and so we never went up to Goose Rocks Beach during the war. And of course, Peter has joined our family. I'm sorry about the jitteriness of the images behind the watch. This is Maggie Sullivan, Margaret Sullivan, who was a single lady nurse. This is a shot of being up at New London with Uncle George with his skating prowess. And he actually taught the McGeeans, who were Olympic skater wannabes, and actually did a great deal of work to start the work in the skating club here at Dartmouth, which Karen learned how to skate through that program. Uncle George built a boat in his basement and didn't do enough accurate measuring and ended up having to take down some of his cellar wall to get the boat out when he got done. Here he's dealing with large boulders that were in his yard, breaking them up. We had a park in front of our house. Hathaway Drive was a semicircular road in front of about 4 houses with a park in the center. And we had great fun playing there endlessly. We didn't have helicopter parents in those days. They just let us go outdoors and said, come in to dinner when you're called. And the neighborhood had a collection of kids, as you can see, who many of them later on were in the war, and I can remember seeing the Red Star flags in windows signifying people who had died in the war. The house was very comfortable. Dad had a nice workshop in the basement behind the garage, and a game room down there. I can remember repairing my bicycle and getting the departure brakes taken apart and put back together again. When I was 10 or 11, I had paper route, and that was after school activities. This clearly was on a skating rink closer to Garden City. Movie cameras were really kind of a new thing, and of course, I can remember seeing, some film went on and on with waves crashing on the main shore and flying kites and things of this sort that were just like, really, they spent that much footage on those activities just because they were so unique and new to be able to record them. We gathered lots of people on the weekends for picnics and so forth during the summertime. Some of them were employees of Dad's. Airedales were the standard breed of dog in our family for very many years. The safest form of travel was crawling. Dad took great pride in his garden. During the war, I was in the Sea Scouts as well as the Boy Scouts. I remember thinking I was a great shot in uniform, learning how to handle a rifle. They were all dummy rifles. And I never achieved Eagle Scout, which my dad was very proud of. And I think we still have his Eagle Scout jacket with all his merit badges on it. I got up to Star, and that was as far as I went. I got distracted, I think, when we moved up to New Hampshire. Peter had a hard time keeping his pants on, as you will see here. Dad used both of us in his photographs on occasion. This is Betsy Clark, Mom's second cousin, and she became January, married a doctor, and they lived up in northern Vermont, out Essex Junction or near Burlington, and had 3 girls and a boy. We've stayed in touch with them. You can see the watermelon was well laced with seeds back in those days. They hadn't fully developed a seedless watermelon by any means. So that was quite a nice large backyard area. People who lived in the city loved coming outside of the metropolis and out into the Garden City area. Many of the dahlias that Dad grew, the blossoms were put in, submerged in water and globes in the house. Susan was on Mother's Day magazine. As near as I can figure out, this is 1943. The image was not quite in focus, so it was kind of hard to tell, but it looked like it was 1943. What a cutie pie. Of course, he still is. This is Roberta Close and Fred Close arriving at Peter's birthday party at 36 Hathaway Drive. I wish I knew the name of this young lady who was a very frequent visitor. You'll see many pictures of her. Peter had great, look at all the women. I guess Freddie, little young Freddie was the only other guy at this party. My 4-year-old birthday party. The Close family came up to New Hampshire. Roberta spent the first summer in 1946 with us as a partner for Susan, and I had a Dickie Schott who came up, and I'm not sure any of the shots are in any of these earlier pictures. I do remember draping that dining room table with sheets so that we could have a tent, and we played with Peter. An example of sharing germs. Here the young lady is again with Peter in the playhouse in the backyard that was a great center of activity. I don't know whether the folks built an addition on the back of that house or not. At one point, the family took me, along with Maggie Ricks, to the Adirondacks. I still remember riding a bus into the middle of the night. It seemed like we were going into nowhere for a weekend of skiing up in some camp or lodge up in the Adirondacks with a group of people. I don't know whether it was a ski club from the city the folks were connected with or what. But the skis were good old-fashioned loose bindings with very flexible boots. LOJ Club. Of course, seeing a raccoon having been trapped by the gentleman who was the manager of this lodge and watching him skin it was eye-opening to this young child at the time. And this was all during the war, where I was sent up to Camp William Lawrence in Center Tuftonboro, New Hampshire, on 3 successive summers, 1943, 1944, 1945. And that is the waterfront, and this is the play fields of the camp. And these were taken when Dad and Mom came up to get me at the end of the war in 1945, and they rented a plane, and they came with Bob and Peg Graves, who were Long Island friends, and we apparently they visited Lake Winnipesaukee and had fun, and then after camp, we went with the Graveses, that's Coburn Graves, to Maine and did some fishing and had lobsters. The big transition for us was the move to New Hampshire. Now, Dad had gone to Dartmouth and graduated in 1930, so he was familiar with the Garipes, and this is Earl Garipy, who was a clerk of the works, help us get started to build our house, which was not a house at all. It was a barn, because the two builders that they found knew how to build a barn, but not a house. And of course, so one time, that was Roberta and Susan, indiscreetly shown by my father, and we went up onto the Androscoggin River, just south of, or rather east of Lost River, and there was a nice swimming hole that Dad remembered from his college days that we enjoyed, but the water was cold. Young Peter was rather reluctant to get himself into the water, but the rest of us had a grand time. So here we are working that summer to get started with building what was to be the lodge. And Dad used every opportunity to clown up his pictures. This was the carport we had originally that eventually became part of the dining room and entrance area. But you see there's no dormers upstairs because we didn't know that we were going to be expanding our use at this point. The great locust tree down by where the barn is now is in the way, and so Chet and John, this is Chet with the axe, and I didn't quite get it so you could see the tree fall. This is the opposite hill, the other side of the pond, and it made for great fun. Of course, you had to climb up in order to ski down, because this was prior to the time of actually having a ski tow. And so as teenagers, we had wonderful experience. another group of people. Kempe, who was standing there with a tufted hat, was a retired Harvard professor, friend of mom and dad, a bachelor gentleman, and he was full of all kinds of stories and great fun. Some of those stories I recount in my memoir. Once in a while, Mom would come and meet us at the bus, although generally we walked the 2 miles to the bus each day, Susan and I did. We had this wonderful Jeep with the sleigh bells on the winter top. And now you can see the dormer sheds in the upper part of the building. And those were put in when we discovered that we were going to house students for the Ford Sayers ski program in 1948. We had gone up and visited Cannon Mountain. And Chet Pasternak actually his home was Etna Highlands, and is actually the same place that the Sibleys now live. And Chet had a motorcycle, and he was a great tease and a lot of fun. That's the Rockaway troop carrier truck that we used for carrying the lumber supplies up from New York, from Long Island, because lumber was not readily available up in our neck of the woods after the war. Dad would come up with Maggie after working in a studio in Long Island for a week or two, earning money. And I think this is Mrs. Schott, but here Margaret in red and male friend, I think his last name was Hyde. It was always a great treat making homemade ice cream. Mother had quite a recipe in raspberry ice cream that we still used. And this is the back part of the lodge before the well was drilled. That's a large butternut tree that protected our original kitchen area when we were living that summer in Army surplus tents. Clearly, we had an additional gentleman helping, so 3 workers and Dad. And the barn beams were retrieved from a barn that was on this site originally. The land was essentially the Jones fruit farm, and the house had burned down due to, we believe, electrical fire, because Charlie Garpy and I found the electrical box in the cellar hole with pennies underneath the fuses in the electrical box. And of course, part of getting ready and spending time was cleaning up the mess from the fire, and there were buildings that needed to be torn down. Earl Garpy and his wife Helen, they ran the guest house that we stayed in for the first trip up when we were looking at the land after Dad bought it. And this is the area of the cooking stove I made Mom for having her kitchen after I'd been to Camp William Lawrence, obviously. It was all a great adventure. That was our wonderful tractor that we had for many, many years. This is getting ready for the fireplace, building the carport. And you can see off in the distance there to the right of the image, fruit trees. They moved the kitchen after that house got built so we could live inside it. This is our outhouse. We had a drip of water from a well, gravity feed water into the kitchen, and we left that going all the time, so in the wintertime the pipe wouldn't freeze. It was a lead pipe, by the way. And so we had visitors and they all pitched in and helped and had great fun. Morris Hayes was finally hired to do the masonry work, very accomplished mason, and the main single rock of the face of the fireplace was found in a banking in Northampton, Massachusetts. And this is the field just where the ski tow was finally built. Of course, these were the days where we actually had some decent snow. Although one winter we had absolutely no snow and ski school was more like a summer camp. We were absolutely blessed to be able to come up here and leave New York City and Long Island and the hubbub of that area of living. Mom and Dad made this all possible. Dad finally sold his photographic studio, I believe in 1950, and built a studio up here and brought his clients up here. And they certainly enjoyed being able to come up and work part of the day and go play golf, hunt, or whatever. In addition to the fact that Dad had graduated in 1930, that made for the opportunity for the folks to hold not only reunion class events for Dad's class, but other classes. And here a group of exploring Lord's Hill, and one such occasion we went out to Cardigan Mountain and Canaan Lake, and this is Herm Sanders, a classmate who was a physician down in Manchester. Susan was slightly eaten by leeches. I can remember quite a few leeches in the lake. And so she had to get tended to. She's with Roberta. And this is another summer of reunioning and great shenanigans. So learning how to deal with the public and be the hosts for paying guests was all part of our growing up. Finally, after the first time the Ford Sayer group came, Dad decided, well, we did need a ski tow. These pictures are reversed. The tow was actually ridden so the rope was on your right, despite the fact that Dad was a left-hander. And when I filmed them, the film was obviously backwards in the reel of film. Ski tow was easy to ride. The uphill rope was pretty well supported by wheels on the crest of the hill. And we had a wonderful time in the wintertime. Of course, clearing the paths and doing the work of getting the ski trails built and maintained and cutting them in the summertime or late fall to keep the grass down was part of my job. The great gap of time between my graduation from Hanover High School and then eventually graduating from UNH with a commission in the Air Force, and after marrying your mom, we headed out first to Rantoul, Illinois, where I had 9 months of aircraft engineering school, and then down to Bergstrom Air Force Base. So here we are at Bergstrom Air Force Base in Austin, Texas. This was a a paralyzed friend of Mom and Dad's who was an artist who had visited us there. They lived in Arizona. I don't remember their names. And then, of course, Karen was born at St. David's Hospital in Austin, Texas. And so our family was growing. We actually lived across the street from Jimmy Doolittle's son, who was an officer at the base. Flat, hillless country, but lots of little kids around. The Air Force was an incredible experience for me. I had 124 men I was responsible for. We were managing, my job was to manage the aircraft repair sections of the base fabrication. We're headed off for the christening of Karen. The base chapel provided babysitting, so Jean and I were able to sing in the choir at the church chapel. Rob had all kinds of buddies. There were brick duplexes with a common backyard area for playing and grassed into areas. A couple occasions we went on picnics. I don't know whether they were neighborhood or whether they were related to the actual section of the Air Force or not. But this was out in a city park somewhere. I do remember Rob sort of holding his mouth open underneath the beer keg that was dripping. Wearing a hot dog. Of course, we had our obligatory air shows, the B-52. This was when the Strategic Air Command moved into the base, and so my job became one of being a ground safety officer, and we did all the managing of towing, refueling aircraft. After we finished up dental school, my grandmother had given us some money in her will, and we purchased a lot on Crystal Lake in Enfield, New Hampshire. And here we are on the beach of that lot, enjoying activity. We managed to tent on that lot, have a tent trailer. And I don't know who all those people are, come to think of it. At any rate, a long story short, we managed to sell the lot, move to Squam Lake, and then have a right of first refusal when we sold the lot. So we were able to buy the lot back 10 years after we sold it, and we had a cabin there when we bought our neighbor's camp. So we had a wonderful, wonderful time. Mom's birthday in September. This was at their house on Dogford Road. I would like to pay tribute to my parents for all that they have given us, and certainly to Dad for this treasure of 16 millimeter films. We would also have to pay tribute to our immediate back family, the Bamptons, Lou and George Bampton, and father's parents, Lena and Robert Franklin Keene, and a special tribute to Jean's parents for their love and care, making it possible for me to attend dental school and for my family to live in their home in Massachusetts while I was attending school. We certainly couldn't have done all that we did without the support and love of our families, and certainly the love and support of my beautiful wife, Jean. Thank you all, and especially thank you, dear Jeannie, for putting up with all the things that your husband dragged you through and all the wonderful things that we had together as a wonderful family. Proud of our children and their accomplishments, and certainly the things that those children provided us in growing and experiencing the world. Thank you all, and appreciate your watching, and enjoy and pass on the wonderful love that we have felt and share with you. Thank you.